it. There's no studies behind it. This is just 100% an arbitrary amount of money that the legislature feels they can afford. It has absolutely nothing to do with how much it actually costs to provide a high level of education. So I think that's important to know. Everything in our school finance system is 100% arbitrary. So you take that basic allotment and then you do a bunch of adjustments made on both student characteristics and district characteristics. So the district characteristics are like, is it a tiny district? Is it a mid-sized district? And then you get additional funding for different student populations. So for your English language learners, for the most part, you get 10% additional funding. For low-income students, you get a minimum of 20% additional funding. And so your district runs through these formulas and looks at all of their different sort of criteria, and they come up with an entitlement. And you can think of that entitlement as like a bucket or like a jar or something. And so school districts try to fill that bucket up with their local property tax dollars first. And if they can't fill their bucket up on their own locally, then the state fills that bucket with state aid. If their bucket overflows, we call that recapture. That's excess local revenue that is then recaptured. It's also called Robin Hood. A lot of people know it as Robin Hood, but that excess revenue is then collected by the state and redistributed to school districts and charter schools. So what we've seen over time is because the local dollars go in first into these school finance buckets, is that Texas is a growing state. We're a prosperous state. Our property values are growing each year. So across the state, our school districts have been able to fill their buckets on their own more and more. But instead of the state reinvesting any of the savings that they see from that into our schools, they usually choose tax cuts for corporations over reinvesting in our schools. So this has created a lot of problems over time because it's created distrust with both our school system and with the property tax system. Because a lot of people are seeing their tax bills go up every year, but their schools aren't getting any better. They're saying that their schools are still overcrowded, in disrepair, that, they're just not doing the things that you would think with their tax dollars getting higher and higher every year. So people start saying, hey, this isn't cool. Our schools are wasting money. My taxes are going up. But what the average taxpayer doesn't know is that when our tax dollars go up, the state share goes down. And they put less and less money into the system. So that's just like created this huge disconnect. And that's one of the things that HB3 tried to fix, but mainly they did it through tax swaps, which just shifts the burden of taxation from local property taxpayers to the state, but it doesn't actually improve our schools. And I'll get into that a bit in detail as well. So the state's share of school funding comes from a variety of sources. Our state relies primarily on sales tax for pretty much everything we do. So this big part of this pie called the Foundation School Fund is all general revenue dollars, which is primarily sales tax dollars. And then you've got the lottery that is about almost 6% of education. The available school fund is earnings off of the permanent school fund, which is a massive land trust. The Property Tax Relief Fund was created in 2008, the last time we had a school finance lawsuit, and the state was required to reduce tax rates. That's made up of our business tax, the margins tax, and then the Tree Fund is a new one that was created last session. That's they have a really tax reduction and educator excellence fund. That's more money from the permanent school fund and a little bit from Wayfair. That could have been put in the property tax relief fund, but legislators all like to create something new. So they created this new random fund that has like no money in it. And then recapture, that's that excess revenue from local school districts that gets collected. But what's important to know about this pie is that it doesn't get bigger without any changes made to the actual formulas. So like if we all went out and bought a bunch of lottery tickets today, all that would happen was the lottery slice of that pie would get bigger and the general revenue slice of the pie would get smaller, but we can't all go out and buy lottery tickets to improve funding for schools. It's just a part of, it's not an addition to. And I also get a lot of questions, people like, well, I thought the lottery was supposed to pay for education. If we had relied on just the lottery to pay for our public education, we would have maybe 5 days of school, perhaps 6. So the lottery alone isn't going to get us very far. And just think, how many lottery tickets do you buy a year compared to how much you pay in sales tax or how much you pay in property taxes? So the lottery is not going to help us. So now I want to talk about funding every student. This is, I think, one of the biggest things you're going to hear about this legislative session, and it's going to be something really important to track. So our school finance system, it's based on students, but it's not based on enrolled students. It's based on attendance. And so what we see is attendance is way lower than enrollment generally. Um, and the reason why our schools are funded by enrollment, and we're only one of 7 states, or I'm sorry, using attendance, and we're only one of 7 states that use attendance. And it's based on this kind of outdated idea that schools won't educate kids if they don't come, that they won't care about them, that most attendance issues are voluntary and they're related to truancy. When the reality is, it's that low income families have greater attendance issues, and also chronic health issues lead to absenteeism. And when kids are not in school, there's actually greater expenses to get them caught up. So we're pushing really hard to move to an enrollment-based funding system so that we more accurately fund every student. Right now, there's about 8% of kids that are just completely not funded in our school finance system. We're talking about over 400,000 students in Texas are just not funded and are not counted in our system. And then what's extra scary this legislative session, so if you see that attendance line, the kind of dark gray parts is what we projected attendance to be in 2019. Well, because of COVID, we're seeing a lot of attendance issues. So now the current budget is projecting for attendance to be quite lower. And that's going to save the state a lot of money because they're funding based on attendance, not enrollment, and not on kind of projected attendance from the past. So in the legislature right now, they're saying that they're fully going to fund HB3, the big school finance bill, that they're going to fully fund our students. What they're funding is a very, very artificially low count of students. And this is going to create an artificial contraction of our school system. Our schools are going to be forced to lay off teachers and cut programming. But then as the vaccine rollout gets better and everybody starts getting vaccinated and hopefully, we get out of this pandemic and things get a little bit back to normal, all these kids are going to start coming back. And our schools are then going to have to, on a dime, again, expand and rehire teachers and rebuild programs and do all these things. So our approach right now is sort of two-pronged. We're trying to, at the very least, get the legislature to hold school districts harmless by keeping the attendance funding at what it would have been projected in 2019, so that we're not losing this artificial attendance drop because of COVID. And then also trying to push the legislature to move to enrollment-based funding because it's a more equitable way to fund our schools, and it actually counts more of our kids and ensures that more kids are actually counted in the system. So this is something you guys are going to probably hear a lot about in the news and in talk among the legislatures about which kids are we actually funding, and why is it okay that just because a kid's gone one day, we're not going to fund them that day when the teacher doesn't get to knock off 10 minutes early because the kid's out. The teacher's salary is still the same amount of money. And then she's got extra expenses when the student comes back because the teachers are going to have to get that kid caught up. So this is going to be a really big issue. But now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about tax equity, because this is a really important part of our school finance system. And it's a part that a lot of people don't talk about because it's outside of the classroom investments, but it really impacts our state's ability to make classroom investments the way that we deal with taxes. So for a long time, our school finance system has been built on this principle of similar revenue for similar tax effort. The idea is that every kid in the state of Texas has the same right to a quality education regardless of where they live. So it's important for every community to put the same effort into supporting public education. And we count that effort through tax rates. And so though, how our system was looking, So every school district across the state was taxing at $1 per $100 of property wealth. So here I have an example of two very different districts. One is property poor and one is property rich. So our property poor district, they don't have a very large tax base to pull money from. So when they tax at $1 per $100 of property value, they're only generating a little over $1,000 per student. But our rich district across town is got a very large tax base, and they're able to generate almost $20,000 per student at the same tax rate as the property poor district. So if the state didn't come in and do something to equalize funding between these two districts, we would have a situation where we would be asking these two districts to both hire the same quality of teacher, offer the same curriculum, and do all the same types of things. But say one's got $1,000 per student and one's got $20,000 per student. That's obviously not fair. So before HB3, the state came in and equalized between these two districts. So the poor district would get state aid. They bring them up to that basic line of funding. And to ensure that every student got that base level of funding. Our rich district, on the other hand, though, they get a lot of money above what the state says that they're entitled to. So they have to give almost $14,000 back to the state. So this is, and that's recapture. And so what we've seen over the years is all of these property wealthy districts are daydreaming about all the things that they could do for their kids if they had an additional $13,000, $14,000 per student. And you could do a lot. But what they're not thinking about is their neighboring school district down the street that has nothing to daydream about. They're reliant on state aid just to make ends meet. So because all these recapture districts have been upset about the fact that they're sending money back to the state and that the amount they send back goes up each year. And the reason it goes up is because we're a growing and prosperous state. So their revenues are going up. So, but instead of doing something that would be equitable, like raising the basic allotment, because that's the line that decides when you're in recapture and when you get state aid, and that's the tide that rises all ships. So the legislature should have just kept increasing that line, but that cost a lot of money. So instead they decided to let tax rates start equalizing between the districts instead. So now they're allowing school districts to drop their tax rates individually to stay below the state's growth levels. So this is what happens now between these two districts. So the state lowered tax rates for everybody to about 91 cents. So that's what our poor district is taxing. They're bringing in a little bit less money, so they get a little bit more state aid because their tax rate dropped. So they're going to need even more state aid. So that's an expense to the state to let them drop their tax rate. But now our rich district was allowed to drop their tax rate almost 10% below the other district. And so they're paying less in recapture, but it's only because they're collecting less money. At the end of the day, both of these school districts are getting the same amount of money, but the state had to give the low-income district more state aid, and the state lost money from the rich district in recapture. And at the end of the day, kids aren't any better. Kids are getting the same amount of money in this scenario. And so now we're going to see bigger divisions between school districts. We've always been pitting our school districts between rich and poor, but now we're going to be seeing new divisions between high taxing and low taxing school districts. Right now, we've got about 72 districts that are at the absolute lowest taxing rate. And then about 400 something districts are at the highest taxing rate. And we see though now that, it's not about rich and poor anymore. It's about growth. Your level of growth determines your tax rate. So what we're seeing now is that our major urban districts didn't see any tax reduction under this system, because for them to see a growth of 2.5% or greater, it takes a lot of investments. But our really tiny fast growth areas are seeing really, really low tax rates. So, but what this is ultimately doing is requiring school districts that are seeing stagnant or low growth subsidize low tax rates for the part of our state that are seeing the most economic growth. So we're asking the school districts that have the least resources when it comes to growth to help the school districts that are booming and doing absolutely well. And then this starts coming into all other kinds of inequities as well, because Our non-metropolitan fast growth districts are only about maybe 47% economically disadvantaged, when our major urban districts are closer to 78% economically disadvantaged. So at the end of the day, this bill is also asking individuals with lower incomes to pay higher tax rates than people who are wealthier overall. And the ultimate goal of this tax compression is to actually eliminate the M&O tax completely. And that's the main tax that supports our schools. So we were taxing at $100 or $1 per $100 value in 2019, and then the legislature dropped it down to 93 cents, and then we were at 91.64. We're not projecting enough growth to have any reduction in 2022, but that can change as we move through the budget process. And then, the rate is going to drop again to just over 90 cents in 2023. And every single year, that tax rate is going to get lower and lower. And districts with greater growth will be able to drop their tax rates even 10% lower than these rates until we don't have an M&O tax. And why this is really, really concerning for me is it costs billions of dollars each year to compress these tax rates. The budget is assuming that it's going to cost $1 billion for the 22-23 budget just for this compression. That's $1 billion that we can't put into our schools. And this HB3 bill that was supposed to be this great reinvention of our school finance system was really just another tweaking around the edges. And there's no future promises to our kids in that bill. There's no inflation adjustment going forward. There's no promises to fix special education funding, which is completely outdated and a total mess. 80% of our 80% of our English language learners were left behind in HB3 and got no increase in funding. That bill required a full day pre-K program, but doesn't pay for a full day pre-K program. But the promises that our legislatures did make was to getting rid of the property tax. And it's really, homeowners don't even benefit from this as much as corporations do. So HB3 in the legislature last session chose tax cuts over kids. And that's the true legacy of HB3, is a huge cost to the state that is going to make it impossible for us to make future investments in our schools. So with my legislative agenda, we are going to be going hard on that attendance-based funding. We really need to move it to enrollment-based so that we are actually funding every kid. It's just wrong for the legislature to leave over 400,000 students out of our school finance system. We're going to be working really hard to try to get rid of that individual district compression, where some districts get to tax at much lower rates than other districts, because I do firmly believe that we should have equal revenue for equal taxation. And then we're going to try to get to freeze that statewide compressed rate so that it doesn't drop any further. I'm also going to be working really hard to address funding gaps for English language learners, especially in the early grades. Because that was a population that was particularly left behind in our last school finance bill. But all of this really does come down to revenue and making sure that the state has all of the resources it needs to meet all of our state's needs. So we have a whole lot of ideas on how to raise more money for the state. And on here is a link to our legislative priorities, and Janice can share out the slides with anybody who would like them afterwards. And then I just wanted to talk a moment about, being a community leader in school finance advocacy and kind of the ways that you can get involved and share what you've learned today. So I really encourage everybody to build relationships with your House and Senate members. There's going to be a lot more district work, I think, going on this session than ever before, because they're going to be spending less time at the Capitol. So there'll be more opportunities for them to be in your home community. And it's important for you to reach out to your members when you agree, but also, when you disagree, but also when you agree. The legislature never gets very supportive calls. People love to call the legislature and complain about all the things they're unhappy about, which is very important. But they also need to know that you've got their back at home. The Capitol is a very lonely place. There's not a lot of friends in there. And your members need to know that you've got their back. And when they're doing the good things, that they can be brave on the floor and they can take those hard votes, knowing that their community has got their back. And I'm encouraging everybody to really invite your local elected officials to your school functions. Invite them to shadow a virtual Zoom class with a bunch of second graders trying to learn math when they'd rather do show and tell with their cats. I've heard so many crazy stories on what it's like. And I think without our elected officials experiencing it firsthand, they don't really know what our schools and students and families are going through. But most importantly, like, you all are the experts. You guys are the ones that are more on the ground. I'm a data analyst, I'm an advocate, I'm a lobbyist, but I'm not even a parent. I don't have those on the ground stories. I don't know what's actually happening in our school communities. And I feel that that's one of my main deficits in this, and why I rely so much on these community groups that I speak with to really voice what you're seeing and feeling to your elected officials. And then I just wanted to share a couple other resources. There's this really great coalition called Texas Educators Vote. I'm a member of that. And it's all about creating a culture of voting within your schools, about making sure that seniors are registered to vote before they graduate, encouraging teachers to vote and to vote early and to wear their I voted stickers in schools. But it really is just about creating that culture of voting and leading of example by voting, so that our next generation understands the importance of voting. Because I think we may all agree that elections have consequences at this point. And then there's also this great grassroots group called Just Fund It Texas that was started by some students and parents that are trying to get out the message on, and right now they're trying to just get us up to the state wide or the national. We're like way on the bottom. I think like 38th or 40th or worse. I haven't seen the latest rankings, but Just Fund It Texas is trying to really push for us to at least get to the national level of funding. And yeah, so that's pretty much all I have for you guys. This is my email. I can be reached at villanueva@everytexan.org. I'm also on Twitter a lot, especially during session, trying to keep people up to date, but I write a lot about school finance. I comment a lot on Twitter. Yeah, so I guess at this point I can open it up to questions.
Wow, great, Chandra. That was some really good information that I know many of us could definitely use. And some of the information you shared, I definitely was not aware of. So I really do appreciate that. So do we have anyone that have a question for Chandra at this time as it relates to education finance?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your email address, Chandra.
Oh, it's Villanueva@everytexan, VILLANUEVA@everytexan.org. And Janice will share out these slides when we're done here today. And I'm findable on our website too, everytexan.org.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit in the weeds, but I want to take the opportunity because I know you're such an expert. It's about the chapter 313. I've been digging a little bit into that data, and I think there was a provision that began in 2010 where supplemental payments were going to be limited to $100 per student. But the supplemental payments that I'm seeing for some of these agreements is significantly larger than that. Do you know what loophole exists for that?
Yeah, that I'm not as big of an expert on. We've got a Dick Levine in our shop. That's all he does is 313. So I would him. But for people who aren't familiar, 313s are tax abatement programs where corporations basically don't have to pay school property taxes. They often give the schools money in lieu of that. It's supposed to attract businesses to come to Texas, but the vast majority of them are to come here anyways. It's a lot of wind farms and things like that. And they're supposed to be creating high wage jobs, but often these wind farms hire 1-2 people. And so the businesses are getting these huge breaks on their property taxes. And it's costing the state billions of dollars. So we do have a person on staff, Dick Levine, who covers 313s exclusively.
I'll reach out to him. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Ms. Chandra? Wow, Chandra, I guess you answered all the questions. I mean, you covered pretty good.
Yeah, I know it was a lot. I'm sure people are still just trying to digest a lot of that because it's messaging that you don't hear that often, especially the tax side of it. A lot of the education groups out there rightfully are focused on what's going on inside the schools, but I feel like that's my biggest value add in these is I really follow the tax side of school finance as well.
Well, I just believe that was important conversation, a topic to bring to our group as we try to organize parents to be more informed, more engaged with what's going on in education, as well as create supporters for what we're doing. Because when you look at the low income, under-resourced areas, I didn't realize how much of discrepancy between the poor districts opposed to the richer districts. And, and then when you talk about district, like for example, many of us, we are affiliated with HISD in some shape, form, or fashion. So HISD has, there's 9. So in those districts are not, equity is not there. And so we've been seeing that, and we're trying to definitely raise awareness about that. And so I thought that was a great presentation that you did, and very, very informative.
Yeah, well, and y'all in Houston are kind of lucky. Harold Dutton is the new chair of the House Public Education Committee. He's the longest serving member on the Public Education Committee. So it's going to be great working with Representative Dutton this session. And there's going to be a lot of focus on Houston. He talks about Kashmir High School all the time.
He's actually an alumni of Phyllis Wheatley, and that's why I'm the president of Phyllis Wheatley. But you know, when Ms. Maddox, she brought to us about House Bill 1842 in our first session, and the information was very, very informative. And you know, basically, as a parent, what I felt was what I saw was that bill was birthed based on the fact that we had so many schools that were struggling, and no one was saying anything. And so actually that, you know, it just forces, you know, TA to come in there and say, hey, we have to do something about this. This cannot continue. So yeah, that's what I really appreciated about that. And just in that conversation alone, but we are looking forward to working with Representative Dutton, and just, you know, knowing that he's, you know, where we can within reach, and he's actually hearing our concerns, and he's concerned as well. I believe he grew up in that area. So
Yep, definitely. Well, thank you guys, everybody, and feel free to reach out to me. Follow me on Twitter. I try to be pretty responsive. If anybody else is involved in any other community groups that want somebody to speak on school finance, I'm always available.
Okay.
I'm sorry. May I ask one more question? My son asked me to listen to this because he's a teacher and he's in class. So I noticed you, if I'm correct, you recorded the session?
Yes,
because I could tell. How would he access the recording?
He could just email
because
me.
I was somewhat late. I got in about 12:15.
Yes, ma'am. He could email me.
Okay, so may I have your email address, please?
Okay, I'll put it in the chat for you.
Thank you so much.
You have it.
Okay, I thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead on. I'm gonna continue, and
I'm gonna take off. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you for your time. Okay, so let's see where we're at now. Okay. We've had our Q&A. We had Texas, so she's just talked. So now it's just a conversation with you all about what can we do to help our children. Let's see. So the question is here. Parents in education. Why is it important for decision makers to listen to parents more? Anyone? Why do you think it's important for decision makers to listen to parents more? And Jamar, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah, that's one of the questions. So why is it important? I mean, you all can put it in the chat, or, you know, unmute yourselves and just share what you think on why it's important for decision makers to listen to parents more.
I want to lift up that question, like a response that I was thinking of. Because, when I was a teacher, I used to always say, you know, no parent wakes up in the morning, takes their kid up for school saying, I'm going to have kids at school. Every parent sends their best product to school every day, no matter what that looks like. So If the parents are the basis of the support of our best products, our parents know their children better than we know the children as the teachers or the administrators or the school system. So having the decision maker, or having the school system listen to the parents, makes one, it promotes parent advocacy and voice, and two, we're listening to the parents on how to best take care of their best product.
Okay, okay. I like that response. Anybody else? Anybody else have a thought on that one, on that particular question?
I was going to say one thing is that there's a lot of strength in numbers. There are a lot of parents out there. And if we can get more of them focused on education, and particularly education funding, that's a large voice.
Okay. And actually that goes on to like the next question, like why is it important for parents to be a voice in education? And you know, when I think about it, like you said, education funding, that's something that we definitely need to speak on, especially those that live in the low income, under resource areas. And so we can raise those voices and begin to speak about the needs that we have in our schools. Then I believe that's important. And you know, decisions can be based on some of those needs, so we can create some equity in our schools. The next question is, how can parents help improve student outcomes? We'll go to that one. How do you think parents can help improve student outcomes?
I think one way that parents can help, because I think a lot of when we hear these types of questions, they're pretty high level questions sometimes. And so we think all these radical thoughts of like, what's the most extreme way to help? But I think one of the easiest ways is looking in, right? So when we think about student outcome is how they're performing in school, not just academically, but socially. But so maybe parents getting even help for themselves. I know as a parent, there are some things that some academic language that parents don't understand. I know that multiplication has changed, and addition and all types of new ways to do things has changed over the years when it's still the same numbers. But having parents maybe seek out the resources to get help to actually help their children as far as like learning what their kids are learning, and maybe just sitting a little bit more one-to-one and strengthening the relationships with the teachers.
Well, we had Mr. Eddie Orm. I believe Mr. Orm is on the line. He's a former principal. How do you think parents can, what can we do as parents to help improve our student outcomes in the schools?
Well, I think it's very important that we keep our parents engaged, because once parents are engaged and understand exactly what's happening within our schools, they can then be participants and decision makers. Because if our parents and our community assist in helping make the decisions, helping to enforce policy and staying informed, they become partners. And once we have partners and we're connected, then we can all be successful. I think we have to understand that schools cannot do it by themselves, parents cannot do it by themselves, and students cannot do it by themselves. It's a partnership, and we must stay engaged with each other.
And I like what you said about how, you know, I'm gonna raise up the part where you said parents cannot do it by themselves, and it does become a partnership. And I remember in our last discussion that Jamar and I had with parents, we were just talking about how, you know, parents need that support. They need support of others. We need to create that PTR, that parent-teacher relationship. We need to improve that if we're going to, you know, begin to work on improving student outcomes. But you know, just even thinking about that, what factors do we know inside and outside school that impacts our children? You know, that impacts them on performing well. Anybody? Mr. Brian Reed, are you there?
I am, Janice. I am. It's good to hear your voice and see you.
All right, thank you. I'm glad to know you're present with us today. you want to share anything about what you think that parents can do? We need help. Help us. What can we do to help improve student outcomes? What do we need to know? What do we need to do? Where do we start?
Yeah. Oh, this is such a great question. And just for everybody on the call, I've worked in schools for over 20 years. So, yeah, I mean, I think a few things come to mind, like building off of what Eddie said. I think there's ways to demystify the process for parents, and actually, there's one thing to say you're about parent engagement. It's another thing to create a welcoming space for parents to come into the school, and demystifying so much of the jargon and all of the words that educators use that, can be intimidating for folks outside of the space. I think for parents, just understanding the strategies that schools have to address gaps, asking questions, like asking a ton of questions. I feel like it's a great opportunity to understand how schools are using their resources to support all students, and schools should be able to articulate those things. And yeah, I think the best thing to do is just ask questions. I love the comment made about just the power that parents have, in the organizing process to, because that, schools should be a co-created space between the community, between parents, between students, between faculty. So yeah, I mean, I think getting involved, asking questions, and like no question is a bad question in my experience. If people really have a plan for things, they should be able to explain it in a simple way. And a lot of times people use a lot of fancy language if they don't necessarily have a plan in place.
Oh, wow.
Janice,
Well,
I think
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
one of the things that parents can help schools do is perhaps to remind us that schools are not always friendly places for parents. And school people don't always know that. We don't know that some of our parents, number one, have had bad experiences on their own while in school. And number two, as school people, we don't always make space friendly for parents to come into. And that's a conversation that I think needs to happen such that we all understand what our role is and that we must work together.
All right. And I really appreciate the fact that you said that, because that's the direction I was going into. But one of the things I want to hold on to that you said was that parents may have had a bad experience just during the time they were in school. And so that causes them to withdraw from, any kind of engagement or involvement in school, as well as, which is key now, and which I have witnessed as well as experienced myself, is I don't feel welcome when I come to schools to see about what's going on with my child. It's like it's a pushback. And so, I believe that's kind of, that's where I'm at with that. So everyone is saying parents get involved, parents become engaged. And of course, I'm saying that myself, but the schools that and the people that we're dealing with don't welcome us in. And so what do we do about that? How do we deal with that particular issue, right? We care about our children. We want what's best for our kids. We definitely want to see things improve for them. We want equity in our districts. But how do I do that if every time I come through the door, I'm pushed out? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Jackson.
Okay.
Ms. Jackson.
Hi, I just wanted to say I agree with the two first gentlemen, because as a parent and I'm going inside the schools and I'm asking questions, I think that educators need to start being more concerned at the fact that put yourself in the parent's shoes as if you are the parent, because at 9 out of 10, some of us are parents. So when you go to the school and you asking questions, and as a parent, I always tell parents that you need, if you don't know something, ask the question, because in order for you to know what your child is going through, it's best for you to ask questions if you don't understand. And educators, when those parents ask these questions, they brush it off as if it's a problem. That is the problem. That maybe they need to start reapproaching the way they handle these parents, and maybe the parents will be more comfortable with engaging with the school and the educators about their child's progress. That's my opinion.
I like that.
And I love that comment. And to build upon that, one thing that I saw was really successful on the school side is when a simple question at our PTA night where we asked every single parent that came in, what do you want to be true for your kid? Like, what are your dreams? And parents were like taken back that they were asked a simple question about what they wanted and what they saw for their child. So I think it's incumbent upon schools too. How are schools asking questions of parents and families, and how are they engaging families to better understand what they want? Because the school is a communal place and should be.
Right. Anyone else? So one of our questions is like you say the best for last is what are some of the challenges, and this is really for the parents and even the supporters that's online as well. What are some of the challenges you think that that parents face in supporting their child in education? What are some of the challenges that you deal with, that you have to deal with in supporting your child in education?
Time.
Hi, time.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of time to be involved in all this.
Okay. Anybody else? She said, Miss Amy said time.
I think another thing that is a challenge is that while I've seen improvements in the way that children who have special needs are accommodated or provided for, I do see that one of the challenges are children who are either LEP or even SPED or even, not speaking of special education services, but ESL, or even those students who are in gifted and talented programs. I just think that being able to serve students at whatever level they're on, that's become an issue because some school systems are neglecting that, and some people have one catch-all type of lesson series when every child is different.
Okay. Well, I know Miss Jackson, she works with kids. Miss Jackson, you mind sharing with them what you're actually doing with children? She's also a mother, and so she's actively involved in what's going on in the schools in which her children go, but she also do other works as well. Miss Jackson, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
You mind sharing with us what it is you're doing with the youth, with the kids that you're working with?
So I have a nonprofit organization off of Homestead Road in the northeast side of Houston, Texas. We specialize in children that have or exhibit emotional disturbance or mental health issues that are having difficulty maintaining in a school setting. We give them additional support. We kind of like advocate for them as well as the parents, because sometimes the school district, as a mother that has a child that has special needs, the school district really tends to push them to the side and to the curb, don't provide the necessary resources that these children need. And as well as the parents, because the parents want to be involved, but sometimes educators tend to, I say educators are bulliers. I'm just gonna be honest with you. Sometimes, as a parent, I walk into school and I wanna know what's going on with my child, and he could be exhibiting behavioral issues, but 9 out of 10, it's not the behavior issues, it's something that happened at home or whatever the case may be. And educators are quick to say, this child has ADHD, this child has behavioral issues, this child is out of control. How about working and partnering with the parent to figure out what's the problem, what's happening at home, so we can better make this child academically successful? And that's what my organization do. We tap into students, or we tap into our school district and we find students that are having challenges at school. We connect with their parents. We put them on a program. The parent has to sign a contract stating that they're going to be involved, because in order for a child to be successful academically, the parent has to be involved. You know, you just can't send them to school and expect for the school to do everything, but it's vice versa. Everybody has to do their part. So that's what we do here at Karen Does Justice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Someone else had something? I know when we talk about challenges that we face in supporting our student education, especially with the new technology, everything being online and stuff like that. And I know that's a major challenge for many of our parents. And I have a few parents that's online that can actually, I hope that can address that particular issue, how it has been challenging for them to support their children in education and actually having to work. Jeree, are you there? What about Miss Shaky? Are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
I'm here. What's the question?
How challenging has it been for you to support your child with online learning? What is the challenge? What has the challenge been for you with that?
The time and the teacher's communication, as far as with work assignments or just really the communication, the main thing.
And so communication with the teachers haven't been working with you well, so in order for you to support your child online?
No, we'll have to contact the school for any issues with online or whenever they testing. Those are the issues that I have been, the challenges with, as far as with the online learning. The kids are really teaching themselves.
They're teaching themselves. Oh, okay. So what do you mean by that? So are the teachers not in class? Because I know, like, for myself, I see that, some of the teachers actually have students that are in class, and then they are also trying to teach online. So what are you saying when you talk about the students have to teach themselves?
Some of the teachers just put the assignments online and just, they might give instructions on how to do something, but after that the kids online are on their own.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Marie, are you there? Ms. Smith, are you there? Are there any other parents on the line that actually are having challenges as it relates to supporting their kids with education at this time?
I'm lucky in that my daughter is not yet in school, in grade school, but with my nieces and nephews, one of the major challenges, particularly with early elementary, is that similar to what Ms. Shaky was saying, so much of it is independent work. And so there's a portion of the day that's guided for them. But when your child is at a grade level where they can't read and write independently, there's no such thing as independent work. And so having to find ways and opportunities to support them and monitor that work throughout the day. And then also knowing that in a traditional classroom, there's so many different checks for understandings, and teachers are kind of checking on your work as you're going to correct you along the way. But by the time a teacher is able to check back in on a student's work, it's after they've done a full thing. And if they're off track entirely, there's not necessarily the same avenues to go back and adapt course and to continue the work. And so it also feels harder to correct those behaviors or challenges because they don't even they've already convinced themselves that the wrong way is the right way by the time they're told it's the wrong way.
Right. I actually deal with that myself as a grandparent. Two of my daughters are actually like working. And so when they work, I have their children. And so just, watching and observing how the students function online and how the teachers communicate with them. I mean, it irritates me at times. It's many times that I've had to, call the school and say, hey, what class is he supposed to be in? He's in the second grade. And I have to call the principal because they didn't put him in a class or give him the link in which class he's supposed to go to. And there's many times that I may go and look over his shoulder and the screen is just black. The teacher have left and didn't say anything, or the teacher just basically just turned off the screen and teaching the class. So I really seen something. It's really been challenging for myself with that, because it's like, I really don't know what to do other than just close the computer and try to work with him at that grade level that he's at. Because I mean, when I see them put like a whole stanza in front of those children, or a paragraph for second graders that's actually learning to read, and ask them to do the work, I don't understand, why they give a child something like that. So, anybody else want to share? Mm-hmm.
I would like to share. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'm kind of baffled with the way the education system is going for our children. I'm a grandparent, and I have a granddaughter that lives in District B under HISD, and she goes over to KIPP, and they also, they go to school, and then when the COVID pandemic hit, they was doing the online, and what I found most difficult, because I shared in the process with my daughter-in-law, helping Amani to understand this new way of trying to educate her online, then versus she go back to school. And so I was just listening in that this is the thing that parents and grandparents are facing. When I was in middle school, we had my mom there at the house that was our number one educator. She worked with the instructors. We got our classwork when we was there in school. When we came home, my mom picked back up from where the teacher left off, to making sure we learned our spelling words, we learned our math problems, and so on and so on. We are faced with so many challenges with our babies, and it's so frustrating and irritating that I do believe that some teachers are doing the best they can to work with what they have, but it's not enough, because our boys and girls are still being cheated out of the process of getting a proper education. And I thank Ms. Janice, first of all, for having these sessions, these meetings, for us to try to come up with ideals and ways to see how we can get through this without being stressed out and irritated, to making sure that our boys and girls have the proper education they need. I am really, really concerned about the academic part for the children, because what this does is that it keeps them further and further behind. And if they do have a heart and mindset to exceed when they get much older, they would lack the fundamentals and process of the foundation of the basic of education in the subjects that they need. And I heard somebody say just a few minutes ago that our kids' attention span can lose it so quickly when they're on these Zoom call meeting online sessions, because and then doesn't give the teacher an ample amount of time to go back if a child has a question. First of all, when we was in school, we would have to read the material, and then if we had a question, that teacher was there on site to be able to answer that question. So, by our kids being flip-flopped back and forth from online and not in school because of the pandemic, and then now they have an opportunity to go back and the classrooms are reduced, it's too much. It's too much for our babies. So how do we get through this? Through much prayer and supplication, being the parents and grandparents that we are, that care to try to educate our kids as possibly and our grandkids as possibly, making sure we keep in communication with that instructor, because our children or grandchildren spends 80% of the time of that day in the schoolhouse, you know, or online, trying to make some sense of what they're reading and what they're faced with. So my heart is aching also as I hear the concerns of so many parents and educators and grandparents on this line about what should we do. And we got to come together to making sure that we hold those who are in these positions, in these seats, accountable. I'm not saying challenging there, but I'm saying but hold them accountable for what they're supposed to do, and making sure that the resources, the finances, get to the schools where it's much needed. And I'm just glad that Miss Janice invited me, and she keep on inviting me to be a part of this, to see how we can come together with some solutions to resolve a lot of the issues that our boys and girls are being, and parents and teachers are being faced with. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your input and definitely what you shared. And it's just, you know, in hopes from, you know, with the state of education going forth, we able to create a parent in action team where we begin to take steps and do what we can do to help many of our students, many of our children, especially like you mentioned, I think everybody online is HISD. You mentioned District B, which of course many of you know that has the highest number of struggling schools. And so it's going to take the parents in District B to come together and come up with a good action plan on how we can make change to help improve those schools and help those children to improve their outcome. And so it's definitely going to take parent in action. And I'm so excited, and I'm ready to get to work. And you know, those of you who have been here and continue to support the effort, I mean, I say continue to invite others to come in. We're gonna just really share our stories and what we can do to help make change, and you know, support the positive, and of course speak against what's negative and not working for us equally. That's what, you know, that's kind of what my goal is for that. Anybody else? Because we're getting ready to sign out. We're down to the last few minutes. So the question is, what can you do as a parent and our community member? You can choose to be a voice, choose to be informed, choose to be engaged, be involved, and choose to be engaged. You know, that's the choices that, you know, you can make to be involved. And we want to create that path where our children will have a future, a better future. And this pandemic has really put so many of us in really bad situations, you know, with those who have to be at work and can't put their kids in daycare, are afraid to because of this pandemic. Is a really big issue, is a really big concern. I've heard so many stories from so many parents being concerned about their kids who they choose to keep at home, are now being told that they do have to go to the school just to take the STAR test. And so because we have so many issues, you know, we just have to find ways to come together and come up with a plan to help support the decisions that are being made that's going to impact us the most. Anyone else have anything before we set it off? Our next State of Education meeting is going to be on February 23rd. And it's going to be, again, noon and 6. We may just do noon, but we're going to start talking about the parent responsibilities and rights as it relates to education. I believe that's a good start for us to go there. Those of you that are here again, thank you all for joining us on today. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to do so. And that's pretty much all I have. Anyone else have anything? I guess my evening crew gonna be the rowdy crew tonight. Because my noon crew was quiet today. Last week, the first session, that morning crew was really rowdy. Everybody was participating and active, it's like they were alive. And then the night crew was like a more smaller setting. So hopefully I get that again tonight. So thank you all again. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you,
Janice, for having
Janice.
us.
Thank
Bye.
you.